Dear Rabbi Steinberg, dear President of the Zentralrat der Juden, Dr. Schuster, dear Vice President Lea, dear Ambassador Dr. Klein, dear Rabbi Spinner, dear Dean Eifert, dear Dr. Skoplo, dear Mr. Dover, dear Mr. and Mrs. Rom, dear representatives of the Europäische Rabbinerkonferenz and the Orthodoxe Rabbinerkonferenz Deutschlands, dear colleagues and students, ladies and gentlemen, we have gathered here this evening in honor of the fourth, I've read fourth, I think fifth, but I'm not sure, and I've learned in Jewish law it's always a question of interpretation. Perhaps we have to discuss whether the first lecture was the first lecture or only the introduction of the next lecture, then the next lecture was the first. I don't know. So in my opinion, it's the fifth Hildesheimer lecture, but in the opinion of the PT in front of you, it's the fourth. Okay. The fifth or fourth Hildesheimer lecture organized jointly by the Berliner Studien zum Jüdischen Recht and the Rabbinerseminar zu Berlin. Prior to its censure by the Nazis exact 80 years ago in 1938, in the aftermath of the pogrom night, the Hildesheimer Rabbinical Seminary, named after its founder, Rabbi Israel Hildesheimer, was likely the most relevant institution for the education of Orthodox rabbis in Western Europe. In 2009, the Rabbinerseminar zu Berlin was re-established by the Zentralrat der Juden in Deutschland and the Ronald S. Lauder Foundation and has since been run by Rabbi Spinner. Rabbi Israel Hildesheimer, who studied Semitic languages in Berlin and other places during the 19th century and received a PhD at the University of Halle, developed the idea of combining religious Orthodox education with the studies of other academic fields. This concept is the cornerstone of rabbinical seminaries to the present day. Rabbi Hildesheimer himself was never able to combine his education at the rabbinical seminary with lectures and studies selected from the university's course catalogue in his lifetime. Opening up this possibility to students of the rabbinical seminary today, however, is the stated goal of the cooperation between the Berliner Studien zum Jüdischen Recht, a joint program founded more than 20 years ago by the Faculty of Law and the Faculty of Theology here at Humboldt-University and the Rabbinical Seminary in Berlin. The series of lectures, known as the Hildesheimer Lectures, held here in the Senate Hall of the Humboldt-University, is one of the achievements resulting from this outstanding cooperation. Therefore, Rabbi Steinberg's lecture tonight is not only in a line with a long-standing tradition of top-class academic lectures, but also in the line with the traditions of Hildesheimer Rabbinical Seminary. By joining forces and establishing this series of lectures, the Rabbinical Seminary in Berlin and the Berliner Studien zum Jüdischen Recht have turned Rabbi Hildesheimer's vision into a reality. Lectures like the one we are about to hear tonight are the instrument through which Jewish Orthodox teachings can be introduced into the university's academic curriculum. Rabbi Hildesheimer and his peers had not been able to achieve such a degree of intellectual exchange. Universities, especially, were not willing to collaborate with the Hildesheimer Seminary on organizing academic lectures. When the Nazis finally came into power, Jewish studies were completely banned from the universities. The current cooperation, in which the Humboldt-University is represented by the Berliner Studien zum Jüdischen Recht, aims at reintegrating the Jewish analytical thinking into the academic curriculum of Humboldt-University. It brings together the faculties of theology and law as the respective carriers of the program. For the commemoration service in May 2013, remembering the book burning of 1933, the faculties choose Professor Rabbi Tzvi Blanchard from New York as the keynote speaker. Rabbi Blanchard is a longtime visiting professor of Jewish law here at Humboldt-University. With the help of Rabbi Blanchard's speech, we were able to show that the science of Jewish studies that had wrongfully been expunged from academic life in Germany 80 years ago has returned. Just a few months after, the Hildesheimer lecture were established as a second important pillar in reintroducing Jewish studies into the university's syllabus. The importance of this step was reflected in the prominent keynote speaker at the opening event in December 2013, the European Chief Rabbi Pinchas Goldschmidt. Since then, the series of Hildesheimer lectures has assembled great Jewish thinkers from all over the world who have spoken right here in this hall. The list of past speakers includes Professor Nahum Rakova from Israel, perhaps you know him, Chief Rabbi Lord Sachs from Great Britain, Chief Rabbi Goldstein from South Africa, as well as our longtime visiting professor of Jewish law, Rabbi Tzvi Blanchard and Rabbi David Bleich, who was awarded an honorary doctorate from the Faculty of Law at Humboldt-University in 2010, both of who are from New York City. One goal of our lecture series from its very beginning was bring the global perspective of Jewish thinking to Berlin. Rabbi Avraham Steinberg, our lecture tonight represents Israel again, the focal point of Jewish thinking today. The lecture tonight will be held beneath the portrait of the explorer and scientist Alexander von Humboldt. He left Berlin to travel the world and study nature's wonders. His brother Wilhelm von Humboldt, inspired by the ideas of enlightenment, founded the Berlin University, which became the most progressive school of its time. Here in this Senate Hall, with this lecture series, we unite insights, ideas, and knowledge of Jewish law from all parts of the world. This is the mutual goal of the Berliner Studien zum Jüdischen Recht and the Rabbinerseminar zu Berlin. And now I would like to extend a warm welcome to you, Rabbi Steinberg. Thank you so much for accepting the invitation and speak to us tonight. We are looking forward to hearing your lecture.
Sehr geehrter Herr Präsident Schuster und Herr Vizepräsident Lehrer, Herr Botschafter Dr. Klein, sehr geehrter Herr Dover von der Wohl Foundation, sehr geehrter Herr Rom und sehr geehrte Frau Rom von den Freunden des Rabbinerseminars, sehr geehrte Vertreter der Europäischen Rabbinerkonferenz und der Orthodoxen Rabbinerkonferenz Deutschlands, liebe Kolleginnen und Kollegen, liebe Studierende, and last but not least, a very warm welcome to Rabbi Professor Avraham Steinberg, our highly esteemed speaker tonight. Ich freue mich sehr, Sie als Dekan der Juristischen Fakultät hier heute Abend im Namen der Humboldt-Universität im Senatssaal der Universität unter den Linden zur 4. oder 5. Hildesheimer Lecture 2018 begrüßen zu dürfen. Es ist für die Juristische Fakultät eine große Ehre, nun schon seit einigen Jahren diese Lecture gemeinsam mit dem Rabbinerseminar in Berlin ausrichten zu können. Die Humboldt-Universität wurde 1810 als Reformuniversität, Kollege Heger hat es schon angesprochen, unter maßgeblicher Beteiligung Wilhelm von Humboldts gegründet. Zu den zentralen Leitideen, so hat es sich jedenfalls in der Geschichtsschreibung verdichtet, gehörten vor allem die Einheit von Lehre und Forschung und die Freiheit der Wissenschaften. Mit diesen modernen Idealen war sie Vorbild für zahlreiche Universitätsgründungen im Inland und Ausland und schnell entwickelte sie sich zu einer der besten und erfolgreichsten Universitäten. Allein 29 Nobelpreisträger haben an ihr gewirkt, unter anderem Albert Einstein, Fritz Haber und Paul Ehrlich. Von Beginn an hatte die Universität auch eine juristische Fakultät. An ihr lehrten zahlreiche berühmte Professoren, die in der Rechtswissenschaft bis heute markante Spuren hinterlassen haben. Als Hauptstadtfakultät war sie dabei immer sehr eng mit den politischen Entwicklungen verbunden. So verwandelte sich denn auch mit der nationalsozialistischen Diktatur ihr Glanz in Dunkel. Die bedeutenden jüdischen Rechtsgelehrten, die das Bild der Fakultät bis dahin entscheidend mitprägten, wurden mit dem Vordringen der nationalsozialistischen Ideologie angefeindet, schutzlos gestellt, vertrieben. Sie mussten schon früh die Erfahrung machen, dass weder eine überragend gute Lehre, wie im Falle Martin Wolfs, noch höchstes Ansehen, wie in den Fällen von Fritz Schulz oder Max Alsberg, einen Schutz boten. Und das Recht in Form des Gesetzes zur Wiederherstellung des Berufsbeamtentums, wie etwa bei Levin Goldschmidt oder Max Reinstein, als willfähriges Instrument systematischer Ausgrenzung und Vertreibung missbraucht wurde. Der Dekan und der größte Teil der Fakultät schwiegen seinerzeit sowohl zu den wilden als auch zu den bürokratisch durchgeführten Aktionen. Dies beschämt uns heute. Wir sind überaus dankbar und froh, dass diese Zeit und ihre Grauen das Gespräch mit jüdischen Gelehrten an der Fakultät nicht unwiderruflich verstummen ließ. Seit 1996 gibt es die Berliner Studien zum jüdischen Recht in Kooperation mit jüdischen Institutionen. Sie wurden fakultätsseitig von Bernhard Schlink initiiert und werden heute breit von der Fakultät und der Universität getragen, wobei ich das besondere Engagement von Martin Heger dennoch hervorheben möchte. Sowohl der Unterricht, den Rabbi Blenschert seit einiger Zeit im Sommersemester anbietet, als auch die Sonderveranstaltungen stoßen auf ein breites Interesse, auch und gerade bei den Studierenden. Dies zeigt, wie wertvoll und befruchtend die Dialoge sind, und es dokumentiert zugleich, dass wir auch kritisch und intensiv, aber immer einander zugewandt und deshalb miteinander diskutieren können. Mögen wir diese Zuwendung nie wieder verlieren. It seemed more appropriate to me to phrase these issues in German. However, let me switch to English, as this is the lecture of tonight. And I would like to continue with some personal remarks. I came into contact with Jewish traditions for the first time in high school. We had a 3-week stay in Israel, which included a 2 weeks harvesting of grapefruits in a kibbutz and a round trip of 1 week. Our teacher held a seminar in which he tried to make us a little bit familiar with Jewish thinking and Jewish traditions. And I still remember that one of the most impressive lessons was about the Talmud. Being a Protestant, I was amazed by the richness of an approach in which commentaries are collected in the course of time, building a continuously growing context. And it appeared to me that the commentaries were centered around life events and constellations rather than being deduced from terms or concepts. And this approach seemed to me so much paramount in embracing the manifold contradictions in life and the variety of constellations with regard to many crucial issues. My first encounter with a Jewish scholar happened in Berkeley. Robert Post, now professor at Yale Law School, taught First Amendment. He taught it by constantly questioning the reasoning of court decisions and academic articles, and showed impressively how much context matters when talking about hate speech and other issues of First Amendment. Against this background, I'm also personally very happy that we launched the Jüdische Studien at our faculty, and that we have started discussing urgent issues from different perspectives. Today's topic, modern fertility technology, seems to be a perfect topic to experience once more the richness of Jewish thinking, and we are proud and happy that Rabbi Steinberg, a famous scholar in this field, is going to elaborate on it. I'm sure this is going to be an enlightening evening. We are looking forward to the lecture. Thank you very much.
Quod Rabbanim, sehr geehrter Herr Rabbiner Professor Steinberg, lieber Rabbiner Spinner, sehr geehrter Herr Professor Eifert, sehr geehrter Herr Professor Heger, meine Damen und Herren. Ich schließe mich meinen Vorrednern an und begrüße Sie ebenso herzlich zum diesjährigen Hildesheimer Vortrag. Für die Organisation dieses Abends danke ich dem Rabbinerseminar zu Berlin und den Berliner Studien zum jüdischen Recht hier an der Humboldt-Universität. Meine Damen und Herren, seit vielen Jahren bin ich Mitglied im Kuratorium des Rabbinerseminars zu Berlin. Ich bin froh und dankbar, dass mehr als 70 Jahre nach der Shoah wieder Rabbiner in Deutschland ausgebildet werden. Daher begleite ich sehr gerne die positive Entwicklung des Rabbinerseminars. Als ich erfuhr, dass Rabbiner Professor Avraham Steinberg den diesjährigen Hildesheimer Vortrag halten wird, entschied ich mich, meinen heutigen Aufenthalt in Berlin zu verlängern. Denn der Vortrag interessiert mich nicht nur als Kuratoriumsmitglied oder als Zentralratspräsident, sondern insbesondere auch als Mediziner. Wie einige von Ihnen sicherlich wissen, bin ich hauptberuflich oder wie ich sage im wahren Leben als Internist in meiner Heimatstadt Würzburg tätig. Und nicht nur das, ich hatte die Ehre, in der Zentralen Ethikkommission bei der Bundesärztekammer und der Bioethikkommission der Bayerischen Staatsregierung zu sitzen. Daher bin ich besonders gespannt auf den heutigen Vortrag von Ihnen, sehr geehrter Herr Rabbiner Steinberg, über die rechtlichen und halachischen Perspektiven einer modernen Reproduktionstechnologie. In beiden Ethikkommissionen haben wir ausgiebig diskutiert, auch über Reproduktionsmedizin. Was ist medizinisch machbar? Wo liegen die Grenzen? Denn ich meine, nicht alles, was medizinisch möglich ist, ist auch ethisch vertretbar. In der jüdischen Religion nimmt das Gebot "Seid fruchtbar und mehret euch" einen hohen Stellenwert ein. Um das Gebot und den Wunsch nach Kindern zu erfüllen, ist im Judentum vieles möglich. Fragen der Medizinethik werden in Israel anders diskutiert als hier in Deutschland, denn das jüdische Religionsgesetz, die Halacha, kommt zu anderen Schlüssen als die christliche Lehre, die in Deutschland ebenso wie die säkulare Perspektive die Diskussion beeinflusst. Dadurch ergeben sich wiederum Unterschiede zwischen deutschen und israelischen Gesetzen. Das gilt zum Beispiel und ganz besonders für die Präimplantationsdiagnostik, die in Deutschland deutlich restriktiver angewandt wird, oder die Stammzellforschung, die in Israel deutlich stärker gefördert wird als hierzulande. Doch ich möchte nicht zu viel vorwegnehmen, sondern Ihnen den heutigen Referenten vorstellen. Rabbiner Professor Avram Steinberg. Rabbiner Steinberg wurde 1947 in einem Displaced Persons Camp in Oberfranken, genauer gesagt in Hof, geboren. Bereits im Alter von 2 Jahren verließen seine Eltern mit ihm Deutschland und gingen damals noch Palästina, heute Israel. Nach seinem Schulabschluss studierte Rabbiner Steinberg Talmudstudien und jüdisches Recht an der Yeshivat Merkaz Harav Kook in Jerusalem. Außerdem schloss er ein Medizinstudium an der Hebräischen Universität in Jerusalem ab. Heute leitet Rabbiner Steinberg die Abteilung für Medizinethik im Shaare Zedek Medical Center in Jerusalem. Dort hat er bereits seine Ausbildung zum Kinderarzt absolviert und als leitender pädiatrischer Neurologe gearbeitet. Darüber hinaus ist Rabbiner Steinberg Direktor des Yad Harav Herzog Institut, das die Talmudik Enzyklopädie herausgibt. Rabbiner Steinberg ist auch stellvertretender Vorsitzender des israelischen Nationalrates für Bioethik. Er verfasste die weltweit erste Enzyklopädie zur jüdischen Medizinethik. Dafür wurde er 1998 mit der höchsten Auszeichnung des Staates Israel, dem Israelpreis, ausgezeichnet. Er berät das israelische Parlament und das israelische Oberrabbinat in medizinethischen Fragen. Im vergangenen Jahr wurde Rabbiner Steinberg sogar als einer der ersten beiden Rabbiner weltweit von Papst Franziskus in die Päpstliche Akademie für das Leben berufen. Diese Akademie entwickelt kirchliche Positionen zu Fragen der medizinischen Ethik. Rabbiner Steinberg hat 43 Bücher verfasst und herausgegeben, außerdem zahlreiche Artikel, die sich insbesondere mit allgemeiner und jüdischer Medizinethik befassen. Dear Rabbi Steinberg, you have had lectures all around the globe. Your expertise is often inquired and highly respected. Today, you are going to share this expertise with us. We feel honored that you are here with us today, and we are looking forward to your lecture. Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to invite Rabbi Steinberg now to take the floor. Thank you very much.
Thank you for the eulogy. It's really a tremendous pleasure and honor for me to be here with you and to share with you some of the Jewish legal and religious and ethical aspects of a very new and developing field which really affects many, many people all over the globe. And there are very different positions on the dilemmas that these advancements have brought with them. And I'll try to present some of the issues from a Jewish and a legal point of view. For fear of omitting any of the dignitaries, I won't mention the names of the people who are here in front and the colleagues, the rabbis, and the important audience, and thank you for coming to listen. So I bring you greetings from Jerusalem. This is Shaarei Tzedek Medical Center. It's a very unique hospital in a sense that by its bylaws, it operates according to Jewish law, which is not a simple matter to run an ultra-modern hospital. There are 1,000 beds, all the departments of medicine in modern medicine available, and yet try at least to run it according to Jewish law. And humbly, I can state that I am leading the group that is trying to solve almost daily questions that come up, because almost daily there are new issues, or they are new for people who come as patients, or they are new for physicians who were not exposed to these issues, or they are really new and need some answers. So the topic, as we discussed, is the reproductive technologies from a Jewish perspective. Doesn't move. Oh. Okay, so obviously everyone would like to have children, and not only to have children, but to have healthy children. But unfortunately, not everyone is able to have children, and sometimes if they have children, they are disabled for various reasons, and the new fertility technologies make it more available to more people to have healthy children. Just to start with a little bit of a humor, there's a meeting between the Nobel Prize laureate Anatole France and the beautiful dancer Isadora Duncan in 1923. Duncan says, "Just imagine a child with my beauty and your brains." France says, "Yes, but imagine a child with my beauty and your brains." So it is not so simple always to have a child as desired by parents. So just to bring you into the subject, there are about 10 to 20% of married couples who are infertile worldwide. That's a huge number, getting to about 100 million couples around the world that are infertile. About 25 to 40% are because of male factors, 40 to 55% are because of female factors, 10% are because of incompatibility from a medical point of view, not because the husband and wife don't like each other, but just as a couple, they can't conceive. And 10% are yet unknown, but these percentages are going lower and lower because we have better diagnostic availabilities. And in 20 to 30%, more than one factor of those are in fault. Sometimes it's a combination of a male and a female factor. Sometimes it's an incompatibility but with a problem, and so on. So it is really a major issue for couples. Fertility and infertility, from a Jewish point of view, is a very important subject. Fertility is regarded as a blessing, and infertility is a form of a curse. Because really, when a couple gets married, one of the major objections to get married is to have children. So that a barren woman feels like a dead woman. And I assume all or most of you know the famous saying of Rachel, of the maternal dignitary. She said to her husband, "Give me children, otherwise I am dead." So that not having children, despite the fact that the husband loves her, is not sufficient to fulfill the woman's feeling of being a mother. So that the commandment that is really the first mentioned in the Bible is be fruitful and multiply. But in order to be fruitful and to multiply, you have to have an ability to do it from a physiological point of view. Interestingly, that a number of barren women are mentioned in the Bible, all of whom subsequently had children. And if you will look in the sources, you will see that the matriarchs, Sarah, Rebecca, Rachel, and many others were barren at some point, and it took a while or a blessing of God for them to have children. Nowadays, there are, besides God blessings, also some possibilities to help from a human point of view. And I would like to draw your attention to some of the concepts that govern today fertility technologies. On the one hand, there is planning of a family. And the planning of the family can be either negative, having less children because this particular family doesn't want to have that many children, either by using contraceptives or by performing abortion, or planning the family to increase by modern fertility technologies, which we'll discuss in a minute. But besides planning to enlarge the family, we can also program the family and make it to a degree that not only will there be a child, but the child will be healthy. And that is really a very important step, and we'll discuss a little bit about these issues as well. They are growing by the day, and maybe by now that we are talking, there is something new to help have a healthy child, but we'll discuss just the principles. So the first question is fertility treatment permissible from a Jewish point of view, or even obligated, or is it forbidden using certain fertility technologies? The major problem from a Jewish point of view is the male factor, where you need to test the semen or you need to get semen from outside donor, and by Jewish law, masturbation is prohibited. So how can we help a couple to have a child when they have difficulties? Because we need to test the male side of the equation. Let me just give you a brief introduction to the ethical issues that concern the whole world, not only the Jewish world, concerning certain aspects of fertility technology. So we know in every aspect that science and technology per se are morally neutral. Me as a scientist, I can invent whatever I want, and whether it is good or bad is irrelevant because it's a fact. If I discovered something, I discovered it. Now it's here. Where does ethics come into play? When we have to use this scientific and technology inventions. So if I invented an atom bomb and I use it to destroy the world, the atom bomb by itself is a fact. The use of it is unethical if I destroy the world. But if I use it to create electricity or to move ships, then I use it in an ethical way. And it's the same atomic power. So it is not the invention by science and technology per se, but rather how do I use it? And that is where society has to implement ethical considerations. From a theological point of view, there's an added problem. Are we playing God? Are we interfering with nature in a way that perhaps from a theological point of view would be forbidden? This couple was created in a way that they will not have children, and here I come with my power of thinking and I make them having children. Did I interfere with a superpower? So that is a theological question. Can we do it? So the answer to playing God is obviously not a Jewish concept. We don't relate to it at all, because what we understand in the power of God is creating something from nothing. That is a power given only to God. Anything that we do something from something is not a power of God. It's the intellect of us that God gave us, and we're using it. And nothing, if you come to think about it, nothing that we have invented over the thousands of years that human beings exist, nothing was created from nothing. It is always something that changed something that is existing. And that, from a Jewish point of view, is always permissible. If you do it in a way that is beneficial, you are never playing God, so to say. And I won't go into the details to prove to you that from a Jewish point of view, interference in nature to help others is not theologically problematic at all. And in fact, my profession, being a physician, could have been something that one would have thought that is an interference with nature. Because if I go to a sick patient who is dying, and God wanted him to die, who am I to give him antibiotics or to transplant him an organ and make him live longer, whereas years ago he would die? So that's an interference with nature, and the Talmud specifically says that it is okay to be a physician. It is okay to be a partner with God to improve the world, because this is what God installed in us. He gave us intellect, and we are using it for benefit of humankind. So that is certainly, from a Jewish point of view, neither playing God and no forbidden interference with nature. So we are free to do whatever we can to help other people. And I won't go into other sources to show it. So let's now go to some details concerning planning of increasing the family. So we have a couple who is infertile and they want a child. How can we help them? So the one aspect is, which is older in time, is artificial insemination, whereby we obtain, obviously dealing with a couple that the husband cannot make the wife conceive because of problems with his part in the insemination, and we can obtain his semen from various sources. We can either take it from a husband to a wife, we can either take it from a donor, a man, to a single woman. They are not married, but the semen is taken and used for a single woman. We can take a donor semen to a married woman. And we can take an anonymous donor, who no one knows who it is except for the bank of semen, and a child is born, and we don't know who the father is. I don't know the law in Germany, but in Israel, up to now, and it's hopefully going to be changed, all banks of semen use the anonymous mechanism, so that if a woman wants to buy or to obtain semen as a single woman, or because her husband has no sperm at all, she goes to a bank. The bank tells her approximately what the characteristics are of the semen of a certain donor, but she doesn't know who the donor is. And the child born will never know who his father was. That is the practice today. There is at the moment a proposal in the parliament, in the Knesset, to change it so that at least the child, when he becomes an adult, will be able to identify his father, not for monetary purposes, as is to say that the donor will pay for his education in a university, but just to know what his roots are. But that is not a simple matter. So these are some of the sources available. Now, if we go to the details of the situation, we can say in general that from a Jewish point of view, it is permissible to obtain semen from the husband in order to inseminate his wife. That is done within the family, and then the child is a legitimate child, and the father is the semen donor. Why do we need to obtain semen from the husband? Why don't they live together and have a child? Because sometimes the number of sperms of the husband are too low to produce pregnancy. If we take out some semen, we can introduce one sperm into one egg and then implant the fertilized egg into the woman, and the child will be born. If it would be done in a natural way, won't be sufficient sperm to make the woman pregnant. So sometimes we have to take the semen from the husband and bring it to the woman one way or another, and it's not sufficient that they just live together. Other times, it's a single woman who is not married, and she wants to have a child. For whatever reason, she didn't find a husband, and she can obtain semen from someone and become pregnant, and the child will be a legitimate child. It is much more complicated if it is a married couple that the husband has no sperm at all, can't get any sample from him, and the only way for them to have a child is to get sperm from another man. That becomes much more complicated and in general is not allowed by Jewish law. But here are some newer situations. There can be a situation where semen was obtained prior to the death of the donor, but inseminated after his death. A very frequently encountered situation is if a husband of a wife has a malignancy. He becomes sick with a malignant disease. The treatment will make him infertile. It will destroy his sperms. Sometimes he doesn't survive, but sometimes he can live, but he is infertile. So in order to help this couple to have children after the treatment, we obtain his sperm before we start the treatment, when he is still fertile. We keep it frozen, we give him the treatment, and if he survives, he becomes infertile, but we have his sperm, and we can inseminate his wife, and they'll have a child. But what happens if we took his sperm before the treatment, we gave him the treatment, but he didn't make it, he died. And now we have sperm in the freezer, his sperm. If it will be inseminated, he will become a father after he died. What status will he have? Can someone be a father after he dies? That is debatable, but sometimes it is even more complicated, and that is that the semen was obtained after the death of the donor. Nowadays, we are able to obtain semen from a man who died. Someone died in a car accident or in war, and the corpse comes to the hospital, and within 24 hours, we still can obtain semen from this corpse. So that is even more complicated, because here, at least, the sperm was obtained when the person was still alive. Here we obtain the sperm after the person died. So, by Jewish law it was discussed, and as I said, this is a little bit debatable, but most agree that from a legal point of view, he still is the father, although he became a father after he died, but it was his sperm when he was alive. He wanted a child, he has a wife, so it's his child, and it has legal ramification of inheritance and other issues that you can think of. Whereas if the sperm was obtained after he died, and the sperm even wasn't in the world while he still was alive, then there is no definition of fatherhood. You can't be a father when you are dead and your sperm wasn't in the world before you died. So that will be a fatherless child if this procedure will be done. There are occasions in Israel, I don't know in Germany, but in Israel, where a bachelor dies, and obviously he never had children, he never yet married, he's a young fellow, and his parents want a grandchild. So they want to obtain the sperm of their son after he died in order to inseminate it into a surrogate woman who would agree to carry the pregnancy, and then they'll have a grandson, at least genetically. And that is not allowed by Jewish law. Now let's turn to the female side. In vitro fertilization, which there are a whole multitude of methods to do it, but the most discussed one is the IVF, in vitro fertilization. And what happens in this condition? So you can see that once we know how to use a technology, we can make tremendous varied combinations that we as society should, I think from an ethical point of view, put certain limits. Just as was said earlier, because you know how to do something doesn't mean that it's ethical to do it. So the simplest situation is a couple that the husband, from a fertility point of view, is okay, he has sperm, but the wife has eggs, and yet they can't get pregnant. And why can't they get pregnant? Because, for instance, the wife has a fallopian tube blockage. And if there is a blockage of the fallopian tube, the sperm that comes in one way and the egg that comes in from the other side can't meet, because they have to meet in the fallopian tube. And if there's no fallopian tube, there's a blockage there, so the two sides can't meet. And that person, and that couple will never have a child. That was the original story of baby Brown in England in 1978. The first time that IVF was invented was for this reason. So both sides, the husband and the wife, are fertile in a sense that they have all the mechanisms and all the material to become pregnant, but they can't because of a mechanical problem. And we don't know how to correct it surgically, although there are attempts to do it. So the way to solve this problem is to take the egg from the mother outside her body, to take the sperm of the husband outside the body, put them together in a petri dish, get it fertilized, and then put the fertilized egg into the woman. And then there will be a child that both genetically and socially belongs to this couple. So we just supervise the blockage, and now we can have pregnancy. That is the simplest way. That is allowed by Jewish law and even encouraged. How about a situation where the husband has sperm, the wife has eggs, but she underwent hysterectomy, she doesn't have a womb, so she can't become pregnant, right? Because she doesn't have a womb. So what do you do in this case? You take the sperm from the husband, you take the egg from the wife, you put them together, and you look for a host mother, a different woman, to carry the pregnancy, because this wife doesn't have a womb. She can't carry pregnancy. So we have now a situation where genetically the child belongs to the couple, but the pregnancy and the delivery was done by a different woman. And another situation is where the husband's sperm is okay, the donor, the wife's womb is okay, but she doesn't have eggs. For instance, her ovaries are taken out or are sick or she can't ovulate. So she can carry the pregnancy, but she doesn't have eggs. So how will she become pregnant? The husband will give sperm, another woman will donate eggs, they will be combined and put in the womb of the wife because she has a womb. And the child born will be genetically only the husband's because the egg belongs to a different woman, and the mother that carries the pregnancy will deliver the child. What are the issues in such situations? And it's a very interesting, basic concept. What constitutes or what defines motherhood? We are used to think that if you say a woman that was pregnant and now she wheels a baby in the carriage, so she is the mother of this child, right? That in the old days was true. But nowadays, there might be a situation where this child is a product of two women, two different women. One woman gave the genetic material, and one woman carried the pregnancy and delivered. Who is the mother of the child? In other words, how do you define motherhood? Is motherhood a genetic definition, or is motherhood a bonding social definition? So that is specific to the woman's side of the equation, because the husband side, the male side, he does only one function. He just gives half of the genetic material to create the child. So he can give his sperm, go to Nepal for a trek for 9 months, come back, and he's the father, right? Because he gave the sperm, and that is the definition of a father. But a woman can't give her genetic material, her egg, go away for 9 months and come back and say, this is my child, because who will carry the pregnancy? So in the old days, it wasn't possible, but now it's possible. She can give her egg, take a trip, give it to another woman, a surrogate woman, and come back and claim that she is a mother. Is she the mother? So different countries and different societies solve this issue differently. Some rely on the genetic part, some on the social part. There are different definitions. By Jewish law, we can't find a definition. This situation was never available in old days. No one discussed it. No one even thought to question how to define motherhood. It wasn't even a question, because there was only one way to become a mother. One woman gives the egg, carries the pregnancy, and delivers. So we have now in Jewish law, amongst the rabbis who discuss this issue, how many opinions do you think? Like the joke, the 3 Jews that meet and talk about the weather, you get 6 opinions, right? So we have 4 different opinions. Who is the mother in such a situation? The prevailing situation now in Jewish law, according to the leading rabbis on this matter, is that we can't solve the problem. But it is there. I mean, just to say I can't solve the problem, here is a child. He says, tell me who I belong to. So the answer is that both are mothers. Who says that a human being has only one mother? Here we come to a situation where one human being has 2 mothers. And why is it important? It is important, for instance, for a question, who can this child marry and who can't he marry? A Jewish child, and I assume a Gentile child as well, can't marry a sibling, right? A sister. If he's a male, he's not allowed to marry a sister. Now, if we know who his mother is, we know who his sister is. If we don't know who his mother is, so who is his sister? So if we say both are mothers, so both are sisters. If there is a female offspring of the egg donor and a female offspring of the surrogate mother, both are not allowed to marry this child, because maybe this is his mother and maybe this is his mother. And then the offspring is not allowed to marry even half a sister, right? So that is one consequence. An opposite consequence are inheritance laws. Let's say this child comes to the egg donor. She dies, and it comes to the children that were born from this egg donor and says, give me part of what this mother left. They said, who says she is your mother? Maybe this one is your mother. Go to them. And when she comes to them the mother that delivered the child and says, I am half a sibling of yours, I want part in the inheritance, they say, who says this is your mother? Maybe this is your mother. Go to them. So he can't get from either of them. So he can't marry either of them because maybe both are the mothers, and he can't inherit either of them because maybe none of them are his mothers. So in other words, this new situation, which is really new and unthinkable prior to our era, created a fundamental question of definition. What is motherhood? And therefore, one of the solutions is the one that I told you. Now, I summarized basically, I don't want to go into too many details because I want to go a little bit to the issue of programming and discuss the situation where not only can we help a couple to have a child, but we can have the couple to have a healthy child, at least from a genetical point of view. By now we know that there are about 5,000 genetic diseases, which means that there are about 5,000 situations where a change in a gene or in a chromosome of one or both parents creates a child that is sick with different types of sicknesses related to this change in the gene. So in order to avoid a birth of a child who has a genetic disease, we can screen the couple in various stages of their meetings. We can start with premarital. A fellow and a male and a female want to get married. We can test them for certain genetic diseases, and we can tell them, don't get married together, because if you'll get married together, you may have a defective child. So obviously it will be their decision if they choose to marry, but at least we can warn them ahead of time so that it's premarital. Then there is a stage of preimplantation, which I'll discuss in a minute. So let's see what happens about premarital screening. So in Jewish law, interesting, already in Talmudic sources, without knowing genetics, but by understanding that two people may have a defective child for whatever reason. We know today it's genetic, but they thought some other reasons, doesn't matter. But the end result was that these two people have a sick child. If each of them marries a different spouse, the two couples will have healthy children. So the Talmud encourages that if there is a family history of sicknesses, that they shouldn't get married in these families, they should look out of the family so that they'll have a greater chance not to have this disease. So that was very vague in those days. In our days, the first disease that was tested for mass screening was Tay-Sachs. It's a terrible disease which causes the child to develop normally for the first half a year, and then he starts to deteriorate, and he dies between 3 and 5 years of age in a terrible suffering situation. It's much more prevalent amongst Ashkenazi Jews than other Jews or Gentiles, so it's a very Jewish Ashkenazi disease. And we know today that it comes from a male and a female that are carriers of the gene but are themselves healthy. So carriers can be totally healthy, but if they meet someone who is also a carrier of the same gene, they have 25% to have a child that will be sick with the disease, who will inherit the gene of the father and the gene of the mother together, and therefore he'll be sick. So we can test a priori a male and a female for the carrier state, let's say of Tay-Sachs, and then if they come and ask us, should we get married or not, if we find in our testings that both he and she have the Tay-Sachs gene, we can advise them to look for different partners so that the combination of them will not create a sick child. So that is an a priori premarital screening. And in Israel, and now all over the world, in the Jewish world, there's an organization called Dor Yesharim, which does this type of testings of youngsters, males and females, and advises them whenever there is a problem. They do it not only for Tay-Sachs, for more frequent genetic diseases. And interestingly, that in Israel, for the past 10 years, there was no new case of Tay-Sachs. So it was eradicated by this operation. And by the way, the founder of Dor Yesharim, Rabbi Eckstein, had himself 4 children with Tay-Sachs, which is a terrible, terrible situation, very unusual statistically speaking, because statistically he should have had 1 out of 4. I think he has maybe 8 or 10 children, so maybe he should have had 2, but to have 4 is really out of proportion. So he decided to avoid this type of suffering from other couples, and he established this program. Now, the other situation is called PGD, or pre-implantation genetic diagnosis. And here we're talking about a couple who got married, either because he decided to take a chance. We told them that they are carriers of, let's say, Tay-Sachs, and they said, let's take a chance. They loved each other and they want to get married. Or they weren't tested, they didn't know anything, they got married, and the first child born was Tay-Sachs. So by now we know that the 2 people carry this gene, otherwise the child wouldn't be born with Tay-Sachs. What do they do further? How do they avoid the next child, or the first child if they knew ahead of time, not to have this particular genetic disease? So what we do is, we take sperm from the husband, we take eggs from the female. Usually we stimulate her to have 15 or 20 eggs rather than 1 egg per period in the normal situation. We fertilized all the 15, let's say, eggs with the sperm of the husband. And then, once there are 4 cells, as you can see here, that's already after the conception, after the sperm went into the egg and it started to divide, and after the second division we get 4 cells. We take out 1 cell out of the 4, and we test in this cell whether it includes the gene of this particular family. So in our example, if this family had a Tay-Sachs child, we are looking in this cell whether the gene for Tay-Sachs is in this cell. Now, if we don't find it in this cell, we know for sure that this pre-embryo is free of Tay-Sachs, and if we'll implant it into the woman, we can assure the couple that they will have a child that doesn't have Tay-Sachs. What we can't assure them is that they will have a perfect child, which usually that's what they ask us to do. But that we can't do. All we can do is say, you had a child with Tay-Sachs who died, or you are known to be carriers of Tay-Sachs. In this case, if we'll implant this fertilized egg, you won't have a Tay-Sachs child. On the other hand, if this single cell carries the gene of Tay-Sachs, then for sure, if we'll implant this fertilized egg into this woman, the child born will have Tay-Sachs 100%. So obviously, what would the couple choose? Out of the 20 or so eggs that we tested, some have the gene and some don't have the gene, so they'll ask us, give us the fertilized egg that is free of the gene. That's obvious, right? What do we do with a fertilized egg that has the gene? And obviously no one will take it, because no one wants knowingly to have a child with, let's say, Tay-Sachs. So that is an ethical halachic question. Are we allowed to do the procedure? And if we are allowed, what are the consequences of this procedure? So the answer from a Jewish point of view, and here we differ from the Catholic viewpoint, the Jewish viewpoint, again, we come to basic definitions. What is the definition of the fertilized egg who has 4 cells outside the womb of the mother? Is it a human being or isn't it a human being? So as we know, the Catholics say, yes, it's a full human being. At conception, it becomes a human being. So if we find this fertilized egg to have the bad gene and we discard it, we actually murdered a human being, right? That's the consequence of the definition. In Jewish law, a fertilized egg out of the womb who has no chance ever to go into a womb, because no woman will take such a fertilized egg, has no human significance. He is not a human being. And since he is not a human being, we are allowed to discard it, and we do it in order not to have a mistake that sometimes by mistake we treat so many couples, and by mistake someone may implant this fertilized egg that is known to have the gene and will have a sick child. So in order to avoid this mistake, we discard it. So that is the Jewish position. And in my hospital in Shaare Zedek, which I told you operates according to Jewish law, we have done a whole host of different genetic diseases, one worse than the other. And up to now, we did about 1,000 couples who were known to have significant genetic diseases potential with 0 mistakes. All 1,000 children were born normal children, where their siblings were either sick or dying, or whether we knew that they are carriers and they will have a sick child. So if you do it correctly, it's a very efficient procedure, and it really saves the lives of couples who want to have children, but they don't want to have very sick children. So now, if we know how to do it, can we do it for whatever reason? So I'll give you a few examples. The color of the eye is genetically determined. We can find a fertilized egg that has the gene for blue eyes. And here's a couple that comes and says, in our family, only blue-eyed children come into account. We don't take any other color. Should we do PGD for this reason and discard all those who have brown or green eyes or blonde hair? Some say only blonde hair or no blonde hair, whatever the choice is. The height of the person. In our family, all are tall, all are basketball players. No one that is shorter than 2 meters can enter our house. We can do it. So are we allowed to use this technology for characteristics that are not medically problematic? They are social issues. Can we do it? The answer is no. We can't use it for non-medical reasons, because this is only to save from serious diseases. Now, what is serious disease? How do you define a serious disease? So it very much depends on what the experience of this couple is. I'll tell you just one incident not long ago that happened in our hospital. There is a gene for early balding of females. A female who has this gene becomes bald at a very early age. And we know the gene. And here comes a couple that the wife has this gene. She became bald in a very young age. And they want to do PGD to avoid a female that will be born with this gene. Is it serious enough to do it? Or is it, okay, so she will be bald. She will wear a toupee, a wig, or whatever, and she'll live fine. There's nothing wrong with living that way. So we decided not to do it. It's not serious enough. Comes this woman crying, and she said, you don't understand what it means. She was 4 years old when she lost all her hair. Said, imagine a 4-year-old girl coming to kindergarten with a wig, which falls off every minute, which everyone laughs at her, which she cried all her life. She couldn't stop crying because she felt so embarrassed. And when it came to the age of getting married, no one wanted to get married with her. She wasn't attractive enough. So that is a serious psychological disease. Really, from a physiological point of view, it's not so terrible. But psychologically, it's a major burden. We had a big discussion, and we're allowed to do it because we thought it's serious enough to this particular woman. And there are many, many such examples. But how about a child that will be born with a gene that will become a disease only in a later age? The BRCA gene is a gene that causes breast cancer or ovarian cancer in women, but usually around the age of 40. So should we avoid the birth of a girl with the BRCA gene, she should not live at all for fear that if she will be born at the age of 40, maybe she'll develop cancer. Is that a significant reason to do so? And if you say it is, soon probably we'll find a gene for Alzheimer's disease. And let's say that someone at the age of 80 starts to forget the name of his wife. So is it rightful not to give him to live 80 years because at the age of 80 he starts to forget? Where's the limit? If you'll say 40 is the limit, why is 40 better or worse than 80 or than 20 or than 15? So that is a very serious debate whether or not an adult onset disease can allow a PGD. And here comes a couple. They have 3 boys, and they want a girl next time. They want to be sure it will be a girl. We can do it very easily. Is that a reason to do it or not? So these are dilemmas that we are facing all the time. Another issue, which we just did recently, and with this I'll finish, we can, if a child that is already in existence, 5, 6 years of age, develops leukemia, in order to save his life, you have to find a bone marrow that will replace his sick bone marrow and save his life, but that bone marrow has to match him perfectly. Otherwise, it will be rejected by his body. Usually, we find another person who has a matching situation, and he can donate bone marrow. And it's a simple donation, a little bit pain, but other than that, the bone marrow is built up again, and if I donated bone marrow, I saved his life, and I didn't lose anything. But there are circumstances where no one known in the world matches this child. So the child is going to die. By PGD, we can create a new child that will be HLA matching to the child that is now in the world. And once he's born, we take his cord blood, we transplant it to the leukemic child, and we save his life. So this family has 10 children. One of them has leukemia. No one is matching him. And the only way to save his life is to have another child. The family decided already long ago they don't want to have any more children. But they want to save their child. So is it right, philosophically, ethically, legally, Jewish-wise, to create a child not for his own sake? He would not have been created ever because the family doesn't want any more child. But now we create him in order to save his sibling. So he is born not for his own purpose, but for the purpose of someone else. Are we allowed to do it? Now, what would be the question? The question would be, how will this child feel once he's born? And in 2 situations. One is that he was born and his cold blood really saved his brother. That would be an easier situation. But what happens if, after all this, we did a transplant and the leukemic child died? Now, he came to the world only to save his brother. He didn't do it, and no one wanted him. How will he feel when he is now in the world? So that is not a simple situation. We, by the way, allowed to do it, and it was successful, and the leukemic child survived. And I hope that they will rear him, the child, in the right way, and maybe even be thankful to him. But think about it, how many issues come out of a technology that was invented for a good purpose, which everyone agrees, and creates now new issues that are so debatable. Thank you.
Dear Rabbi Steinberg, thank you very much for your insight, which had humor, that was structured, and that was an intellectual delectation to listen to you. And so I was sure that it will happen, as it happened now. Dear Professor Hager, Dean Professor Elfert, Rabbi Spinner, it has been a privilege already 30 years ago, Rabbi Steinberg, when we listened to your lecture. It was the first Congress of Medicine and Halacha, precisely 50 years after Reichskristallnacht, as it was mentioned, Reichskristallnacht, as it was mentioned adequately, when we Jewish physicians then had our first Congress of Medicine and Halacha. After World War II, it was the first Congress. So it was a double pleasure this time. Now I speak as a member of the Board of Trustees of the Rabbinical Seminary. Coming back to this 1988, we felt that there was an urgent need already then for rabbinical wisdom, and this is a statement, it was a statement even then. Our Hildesheimer Rabbinical Seminary was founded in 1873 through Rabbi Azariel Hildesheimer in Berlin. It was then the most prestigious Orthodox rabbinical seminary in Western Europe. It closed in 1938, directly after the November pogroms. Precise dates are already mentioned, 9th of November, 38. The names of the rectors of those historical rabbinical seminaries was Azariel Hildesheimer himself as a founder, David Hoffman, Avram Eliyahu Kaplan, and Yehiel Yaakov Weinberg. These names were blessings for the institution and situated, by the way, in today's Tucholsky-Straße, number 40, former Artilleriestraße, also known as Große Artillerie, whereas the Hochschule der Wissenschaft des Judentums were situated in the building where now the Zentralrat der Juden has its domicile. This had never the privilege to join the then Kaiser Wilhelm University, today's Humboldt-University. As a member of the board of the trustees of the Azariel Hildesheimer Rabbinical Seminary of Berlin, it has been, therefore, a double delight to enjoy you and as common guests together with the Studien zum Jüdischen Recht of the Humboldt-University. It has been a longing for rabbinical wisdom since ever, even many years after World War II. But then it seemed for us nostalgic, dream of Jews in this city that had no real expectation then. It was unattainable. Having said that, I'm deeply satisfied and more than happy to state that even now Israel Hildesheimer's spirit is giving us his inspiration in Brunnenstraße 33, his rabbinical seminary, today, every day. Our rabbinical wisdom from Brunnenstraße was already spread into several German cities, and of course, those rabbinical families are giving their utmost to those who, by origin of country, never had the privilege to enjoy their own wisdom, the wisdom of their ancestors. It is our contribution to the civil discussion in Germany, and I'm more than thankful that we could take part in it, take part in this insight that you gave us, and that you are, for us, this representative and teacher in one, representative Israel and teacher in one. Your lecture, of course, and this structure broadened our horizons. Where the guilt of the past shadows ethical considerations. This is my opinion in seeing the legislation in Germany and seeing the German medicine until nowadays. It may now, hopefully soon, shape new approaches and new understandings of tomorrow. New technologies in medicine have to be accompanied by new ethical considerations, as we did, as we heard. Thoroughful, even careful, but never as a mere negative reflection of the dark past of this country. Bringing back rabbinical thought as such, and also in the field of medicine into this city, with this presentation, Rabbi Steinberg, into this very institution here, in which legislation had its most painful deviations in the 30s and the 40s of the last century. It is a consolation, and it's not only a consolation. It's a major step of reconciliation. It's also a step towards humanity that had let us survive over so numerous generations, because it was enlightened by the torch of our Uvis, or sages, as we say. Thank you very much.